we have a housing crisis in Ireland, but now we also have a Ukrainian refugee housing crisis in Ireland. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, Portal?
I'll just give a little quick insight into three stories, really, that's all interrelated. So it emerged that 33 Ukrainian refugees were told they were without accommodation after arriving in Ireland this week. The government is appealing to hotels, owners of buildings and the public to offer their homes to accommodate Ukrainian refugees. As it's understood, the 33 refugees were forced to sleep in Dublin Airport overnight. This follows warnings from government that the state can no longer guarantee refugees housing, and Minister for Integration Roderick O'Gorman admitting that some international protection applicants could end up sleeping on the streets. 33 Ukrainian refugees were told there was no accommodation available after arriving in Ireland, as the capacity at City West Transit Hub was closed to new arrivals. Just on from that, then there was a story about 10 of 500 properties identified for Ukrainian refugees actually housing people. Again, this is from Roderick O'Gorman. He said it's fair to say the refurbishment scheme is behind schedule. Minister for Children, Equality, Disability, Integration and Youth, Roderick O'Gorman, said that while the modular housing programme will be expanded to accommodate another 800 people, he didn't expect units to come on stream until the new year. And then I'm just going to link it to another story then, which is Micheál Martin. And he had a view on the far right. So what he has said is there's a fear that far right groups are exploiting the Ukrainian refugee accommodation crisis. Speaking in Cavan on Monday, Micheál Martin said the situation, which is seeing 43 Ukrainian refugees go without accommodation, having fled the war over the weekend, should not be viewed through the prism of he or the government being embarrassed about the situation. A temporary facility is being established in Dublin Airport, which would provide temporary beds for 200 people. He said the country must do more, while warning some far-right groups will use the situation to further claims the country is full. So if you have a look at the stories that we're looking at there on front of us, you can see the different ways it's been presented. So obviously we've covered the Ukrainian refugees in the airport. You've got the Taoiseach defending the Minister for Housing amid record high homeless figures. Now that is in relation to the ongoing domestic homeless crisis that's already here, preceding any war or mass movement of people from the Ukraine. Again, defending then people sleeping in the airport. Now, I would say that there's always a risk with feeding into far right sentiment, an anti-immigrant sentiment. But it seems to me that's quite convenient for Micheál Martin to suddenly have these fears at a time when they're not performing their duties as they should be in number one, having homes for people regardless of where they're from. It doesn't matter where they're from. Nobody should be on the street in Ireland, and then bringing refugees in on top of that and exacerbating the problem. And the other issue we just thought was worth putting in there at the same time was something that you flagged over the last number of weeks, was that we were due to get mortgage interest rate hikes. That's a situation that could escalate and contribute further then to the problem with homelessness in Ireland.
So that 0.75% increase today, and I believe there'll be another 2 increases over the next 6 months. The situation is going to be really bad. It is, on the one hand, an absolute disgrace that our government are bringing people who are fleeing in fear into a country that cannot provide any services to those people. I think Micheál Martin flagging this whole far right thing is really using the far right as a scapegoat, if you want to call it like that, or as some kind of a defense mechanism for Martin, so that every time their actual policies are criticized, that they'll say, oh, this is a far right element here. The reality is that the policy of taking in all of these uncapped amount of Ukrainian refugees does not walk on its own. It walks parallel with a policy of failing or refusing to call for negotiations and peace in Ukraine, and a refusal to accept that there are 2 parties involved, at least 2 parties in this war, if not more, and that they could collectively within the EU alone, never mind the United States, if they put their heads together, they could bring an end to this war and stop the need for people fleeing from Ukraine to Ireland and to other countries. I just have an add-on to this story here. Communities that take in Ukrainian refugees could get multi-million euro funding. Leo Varadkar said he wanted a community fund for areas to improve schools, public transport, community and sporting facilities. The crisis is now, and it's going to magnify because of the attacks on energy infrastructure in Ukraine. There's going to be a lot more people coming. I understand that the Ukrainian ambassador in the last 24 hours has put out a warning to Ukrainians thinking of coming to Ireland, letting them know that the facilities and services are not here. We're not the only ones having the problem. We can't take any more refugees. Polish cities, just get the full text of this. Polish cities call on government to seek EU and UN help. So Ireland is not the only country that is really bending and cracking under the weight of this refugee crisis. And the governments in the states that are suffering most from these refugee crises are often the governments that are calling for more war and insisting that Ukraine does not negotiate and does not come to a settlement with Russia on these issues. So there's a real hypocrisy and quite a nasty, bitter irony in what's happening at the moment, I think. What's your opinion on the wider issues here, Borden?
The wider issues, obviously, there is an exacerbation of the war. You wouldn't I suppose look at it as being a popular thing for anybody. It's never going to be broached in those ways, but it seems that certain governments, established governments, are certainly gaining from the situation. If you look at the Irish issues that we have here, it seems to be one way of eroding neutrality for us. And just getting back on the far right issue, for me, it's Micheál Martin and the government that is creating any conditions for the growth of the far right. The rapid deployment of modular homes was spoken about, I think, back in 2016 to ease the homeless crisis here, and it never happened. And they're talking about it again, but not for people from here. So they're the ones creating the conditions.
And the reality of the problem is, I do quite a lot of voluntary work for a charity here in Dundalk in County Louth, a homeless charity. And last week I spent 2 hours on the phone when a couple came in. And they were an Irish couple, and they came in and they had the money for a deposit for a house, etc., but they just couldn't get one. And I spent 2 hours on the phone for them, trying to get even a single room B&B for the couple. We got nothing. And I don't know where that couple ended up that night, probably in their car again. So that's the reality of the situation that Micheál Martin, Leo Varadkar, and all of our elected politicians are not seeing and are not experiencing on a daily basis. They're hearing the stories, but they're not having to look into people's eyes and see the pain and try to help them along in a very practical way.